My family always left me out of family vacations, and I finally uncovered the hurtful truth. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong, even within your own family? Like no matter what you did or how hard you tried, they just didn't care? That was me, my whole life. It's hard to explain, but I think a lot of people can relate to it. You know that feeling where everyone around you is having fun and you're just left out, not even invited to join in? It was always like that for me. Every time my family planned a vacation, I was somehow the last person to know. They would talk about it, get excited, and make all these plans while I stood there just hoping to be included. But I never was. I don't know why, and no one ever seemed to have a real answer for me. For years, I watched my family go on trip after trip, always leaving me behind. At first, I just thought maybe it was an accident, you know? Maybe they forgot to tell me. But it happened again and again, and every time it stung a little more. I couldn't help but wonder, what was wrong with me? Why didn't they want me there? It got to the point where I stopped asking, stopped hoping for an invitation. But there's only so much you can ignore before the hurt turns into something bigger, something that starts to eat away at you. Eventually, I decided to find out what was really going on, because the feeling of being invisible, the feeling of not mattering to your own family, it's unbearable. So one day, I started digging, trying to figure out the truth. And trust me, what I uncovered, well, it shocked me. I'm sure you've experienced that too, right? Being made to feel like you don't exist in the place you should feel the safest? So let me ask you, has anyone ever made you feel invisible, like you didn't even matter to your own family? It was supposed to be a fun week, a time to relax and recharge, or so I thought. My family was getting ready for another one of their vacations, and as usual, I wasn't invited. I could tell by the way they were talking, the excitement in their voices, the bags they were packing, and the casual chatter about all the places they were going to visit. They were all smiles, tossing around phrases like, "Can't wait to see the sights," or "We're going to have such a blast." I just stood there, frozen, pretending to be okay with it. But deep down, I felt a pit form in my stomach. This wasn't new. I had seen this all before. I tried to act normal, to blend in with the chaos of last-minute packing. But I couldn't ignore it. The fact that once again, they were all going without me. They didn't even need to say it out loud. It was like a silent agreement. I was the one who didn't belong. The subtle glances, the hushed conversations as they made plans, none of it was meant for me, and it hurt. I mean, really hurt. I couldn't shake the feeling of being invisible, like I wasn't even considered when they were making decisions about the trip. They didn't think to ask if I wanted to join. They didn't think to make room for me. It was like I didn't even exist in their minds when it came time for a family getaway. As I stood there, watching them finish packing the car, it hit me harder than ever. I tried to push the sadness away, but it wouldn't budge. They didn't even try to hide it this time. There was no, "Oh, we forgot to tell you," or any kind of attempt to pretend like I mattered. They just went on with their plans, completely unaware of the pain they were causing. I found myself alone in the house once they were gone, the quiet of the empty rooms weighing on me. I tried to distract myself, watched some TV, picked up a book, but nothing could ease that gnawing feeling inside. I had been left behind again, and that's when the question popped into my head. Why does this always happen to me? What had I done to deserve this? Why didn't they want me there? Was there something wrong with me that made them not want to include me in their plans? I couldn't understand it. It wasn't the first time, and I was starting to realize it might not be the last. But the more I thought about it, the more the confusion and hurt built up. It wasn't just about missing a vacation. It was about being left out of something that was supposed to be about family, about being made to feel like I wasn't good enough to be part of that. The truth was, I was tired of feeling like I didn't matter. It wasn't just this one vacation. No, this had been going on for years. Every summer, every holiday, every time my family decided to go away, it was the same story. It's like they had a script they followed, and I was always the one left out. The excuses were always the same too. "Oh, we just don't have room in the car," or "There's too much going on this time, maybe next year." It wasn't even creative anymore. I started to expect it. I knew it was coming. The planning, the excitement in their voices, And then, just like that, I was left behind. I remember one vacation specifically. Everyone was talking about a trip to the beach. They couldn't stop mentioning how amazing it was going to be. They were picking out hotels, discussing activities, and laughing about what they'd do when they got there. I tried to join in the conversation, trying to get excited with them, but I was met with a quick, dismissive comment. "Oh, we're already full for the trip. Maybe next year." Next year. That's what they always said. But next year never came. I was always pushed to the side while they went on to have a blast. And there I was, stuck at home, with nothing but my thoughts and the emptiness of the house to keep me company. It stung every single time. And it wasn't just the vacations that hurt. It was the little things, too. The casual conversations where they'd make decisions without me, like where to go or what to do for the holiday. I could hear them planning trips when I wasn't around, and when I would ask about it, the answer was always the same. "We figured you wouldn't want to come," or "you were busy with work, school." It was like they had already decided for me, like they knew what I wanted before I could even say anything. One year they planned a trip to a theme park, and I really wanted to go. I thought, maybe this time, things will be different. But as usual, I was left out of the conversation. I overheard my siblings talking about the tickets, and when I asked if I could join, I got that same old line. "It's too expensive, we don't have enough room." But the truth was, I hadn't even been considered. They had already made the plans without even thinking about asking me. I felt invisible, completely and utterly invisible. They didn't care enough to even pretend like they wanted me there. I didn't even get the chance to say, "I want to go too." They just assumed I wouldn't. It wasn't just about the trips, though. It was everything. It was the way they all seemed to have this special connection with each other, making memories I wasn't a part of. I sat at home, watching them post pictures on social media, laughing and enjoying their time, while I just scrolled through my feed, pretending I wasn't hurt. The more it happened, the more I felt like I was fading away from the family, like I didn't belong. I hit a breaking point one night, sitting alone in my room, scrolling through social media, seeing all the vacation pictures my family had posted. The smiles, the laughter, the adventures. It was always the same. They had the time of their lives, and I was nowhere to be found. I felt so small, so insignificant. It was like I wasn't even part of the family anymore, and that hurt more than I could explain. I couldn't just keep pretending it didn't bother me, not anymore. I decided I had to do something about it. I was tired of being the one left behind, tired of feeling like I didn't matter. So that night, I reached out to my family. I called my parents, hoping they'd finally give me a real answer. I needed to know why I was always excluded. I needed to hear something, anything, that would make sense of it all. I tried to stay calm when I asked, but my voice wavered a little. "Why do you always leave me out?" I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why don't you ever invite me on these trips? What's wrong with me?" I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had to ask. I deserved to know. The response I got wasn't anything like I expected. Instead of a real explanation, I got vague excuses. "Oh, you've always been busy," or "You don't seem like you'd enjoy it." It was like they were brushing me off. I was expecting something real, something that would help me understand, but it just felt like they were making excuses, trying to cover up what they didn't want to admit. I remember the words that stung the most. "You never really expressed interest before." It was like they were saying it wasn't even worth asking me if I wanted to go, because they assumed I wouldn't care. It didn't matter that I had asked in the past. It didn't matter that I was always willing to try. The answer was always the same, wrapped up in some excuse or another. And that was the moment I couldn't take it anymore. The emotional weight of it all just hit me like a ton of bricks. Am I not enough for them? I kept asking myself, do they not want me there? The self-doubt crept in, and I wondered if I was doing something wrong, if I was the one to blame for being left out. The more I thought about it, the worse it got. That night, I knew I couldn't let it go. I couldn't keep accepting their half-hearted excuses. I had to know the truth. So, I made up my mind. I was going to find out what was really going on. No more wondering, no more pretending. I was going to investigate, even if it meant uncovering something painful. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to let it go until I got them. It was the only way to end the confusion, the hurt, and the feeling of being invisible in my own family. Once I made up my mind to find the truth, I didn't waste any time. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to dig deeper. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there had to be something more going on. This wasn't just about me being left out of vacations. It felt like there was some kind of secret no one wanted to tell me. So I started snooping around, looking for anything that might give me answers. It started innocently enough. Just a quick glance at the family group chat. I hadn't looked at it in a while, mostly because it always seemed like everyone was talking about their plans without me. But this time, I decided to read through the messages. What I found made my stomach drop. There were all these plans, all these discussions about where they were going next, what hotels they were booking, and what activities they'd be doing. I kept scrolling, hoping to see something, anything, that would make me feel like I was included. But as I read, I noticed something strange. No one had even mentioned me. Not once. Not in a "Are you free for this trip?" or "Would you like to join us?" Nothing. It was like I didn't even exist in the conversation. I even saw some comments that didn't sit right with me, like one from my cousin, "We can't invite me this time, it's just going to be too much trouble." It wasn't even a question. It was more like a statement, like they had already made the decision for me, as if I wasn't part of the equation at all. I felt a sickening knot in my stomach. Next, I turned to social media. Maybe I'd find something there, some hint, some slip-up. And I wasn't wrong. It wasn't just the vacation pictures that got to me. It was the comments and the way people spoke about the trips. My parents had posted about a recent trip they took to a mountain retreat, and as I read through the comments, I couldn't ignore the tone. There was this one from my mom, responding to a friend, "It's just better without me this time. Less stress, you know?" That comment hit me like a punch to the gut. Less stress? What did that even mean? Why was I suddenly the one causing stress? I didn't know how to process it. It was like all these little jabs and subtle remarks were painting a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore anymore. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like this wasn't just about me being inconvenient. There was something deeper going on, something no one was willing to talk about. The frustration began to grow. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being kept in the dark about something much bigger than just being left out of a few trips. It was like there was this invisible barrier between me and the rest of the family, something that no one ever acknowledged, but was always there. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that there were things being said behind my back, things I wasn't supposed to know. The more I dug, the more suspicious I became. It felt like I was getting closer to a truth that no one wanted to reveal. I could feel the anger and confusion building up inside me. What was it that they weren't telling me? Why was it so easy for them to leave me behind? The more I dug, the more the pieces started to fit together in a way I didn't want them to. At first, I thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe there was something I missed, some reason that would make sense of everything. But the more I uncovered, the more the picture became clear. And it wasn't a picture I ever expected to see. I remember the moment everything changed. It was late one night, after hours of scrolling through old family emails, messages, and social media posts. I stumbled upon a group chat from a year ago, one I hadn't seen before. It was a conversation between my parents and a couple of my aunts and uncles about an upcoming family vacation. At first it seemed normal, just the usual planning. But then I saw it, the message that made my heart drop. It was from my mom. She had written, "It's just easier if we don't invite me. You know how she gets. Last time, she caused so much drama over the smallest thing. I just don't want to deal with it again." I couldn't believe what I was reading. My mom was saying that the reason I was being excluded was because of my past reactions, as if I had done something wrong, as if I was the problem. The words cut through me like a knife. But I wasn't done yet. I kept reading. My aunt chimed in next, agreeing with my mom. "Honestly, she's too emotional about everything. She makes a big deal out of nothing, and it just ruins the whole vibe of the trip. It's better this way." My heart was racing, my hands shaking as I kept reading. Was this really happening? Was my entire family really talking about me like this, behind my back? I felt like I was suffocating. All these years, all the confusion, all the hurt feelings, it was suddenly making sense, but it didn't make it any easier to accept. As I dug deeper into the conversation, I realized that this wasn't just a one-time thing. This wasn't just about a single vacation or an isolated argument. There was a history here, a long-standing issue that no one had bothered to address, except to sweep it under the rug. I found message after message where my family members expressed frustration with my behavior, with the way I reacted to things, as if it was always my fault. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. All these years, my family had been hiding something so hurtful from me. It wasn't just about being left out of vacations anymore. It was about the way they had painted me as the problem, the black sheep. It was like I had been the scapegoat for all their unresolved issues, and I had never even known. The shock of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. How could they keep this from me? How could they treat me this way? Not just once, but over and over again? It wasn't just an isolated decision or misunderstanding, it was a pattern of exclusion, a pattern that went back years. And now, I had uncovered the truth. My family had made a choice, and I was never part of it. I had always been the outsider, the one they didn't want around, and it was all because of something I didn't even know I was doing wrong. I sat there, staring at the screen, completely numb. All these years of wondering, of feeling like I wasn't good enough, were suddenly explained. But it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. It felt like my whole world had been turned upside down. The family I had loved, the people I had always thought cared about me, had made a decision about me without ever giving me the chance to explain myself. All that hurt, all that loneliness, it had never been about me. It had always been about their judgments, their assumptions, and their willingness to hide the truth from me. And in that moment, I knew there was no going back. The truth had been uncovered, and it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. After everything I uncovered, I knew there was no way I could just let it slide. I couldn't sit in silence anymore, letting all this pent-up anger and hurt fester inside me. I had to face my family. It was the only way to get answers, to understand why they had treated me the way they did all these years. And honestly, I was terrified. I knew the truth was going to hit them hard, and I wasn't sure how they would react, but I couldn't keep it inside any longer. The day I finally decided to confront them, I felt like I was walking into a storm. My heart was pounding, my palms were sweaty, but I had to do it. I wasn't going to let them keep lying to me. So I called a family meeting, something that felt as serious as it was nerve-wracking. When everyone gathered around, I could tell something was off. The tension in the room was thick. They probably knew something was coming, but they had no idea how deep I had gone, how much I had found out. I started slow, trying to keep my voice steady, but the words just came rushing out. I know what you've been saying about me behind my back. I know the reasons you've been excluding me from vacations all these years, and I need you to be honest with me. Why? Why have you treated me like I don't matter? The room went silent. I could feel all their eyes on me, but none of them said anything at first. My mom was the first to speak, but her words didn't match the guilt I thought she'd feel. Instead, she defensively said, "You always make things so difficult. It's never been about you not being good enough, but you just don't get it. You always make things harder than they need to be." I felt like I was being slapped in the face all over again. Harder? You mean trying to be part of the family is hard? You think it's hard for me to be left out? To watch everyone go on these trips while I'm stuck at home? I was shaking now, the anger and the years of hurt finally pouring out of me. I've spent so many nights feeling like I wasn't enough, that I wasn't good enough to be a part of the family, and you've never once tried to understand me. My dad jumped in, trying to calm the situation, but all he did was make it worse. "You don't understand what it's like. We just want things to go smoothly, and we know how you get." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The justification was infuriating. I wasn't the problem, they were. That's when I finally snapped. I looked straight at my parents and said, "No more lies, no more excuses. This isn't just about making things easier. It's about you all deciding that I'm the one who doesn't belong. You made that decision without even talking to me, and you've been hiding behind your excuses for years. I want the truth. I want you to own up to what you've done." The room was dead silent for a few moments. Then I saw it. The guilt in my mom's eyes, the defensive posture my dad tried so hard to hide. They didn't have an answer. They didn't have any justification left. They couldn't deny it anymore. Finally, my mom broke down. "We didn't want to hurt you. We thought if we just avoided it, things would get better." But the damage was already done. The truth was out, and it felt like I had finally said everything I needed to say. The most emotional part of the confrontation was in that moment of silence afterward. I saw my family's faces change, from defensiveness to shame, from anger to realization, and I knew, in that moment, that no matter what they said or how they reacted, things would never be the same. I had demanded honesty, and even though it didn't bring the closure I had hoped for, it brought me something important: the truth. The confrontation left the room heavy with silence. My family had heard my pain, but their reactions were far from what I had hoped for. Some of them, surprisingly, actually apologized. My mom especially. She said she never realized how deeply her actions had affected me, and I could tell she was genuinely remorseful. But others, like my dad and a couple of my siblings, just couldn't seem to grasp the depth of my hurt. They tried to justify their behavior, saying things like, "It wasn't personal," or "We never meant to hurt you, we just didn't know how to handle it." But those excuses felt hollow to me. After everything I had uncovered, it was hard to just let those words slide. The worst part was the silence that followed. My brother, who had always been one of the closest to me, didn't even say anything. He just sat there, staring at the floor like he didn't know what to do. I was left wondering if he ever really cared about me, or if he was just part of the cycle that had kept me out all these years. The apology from some of my family members didn't change everything. Sure, it made me feel a little heard, but it didn't erase the hurt, or the feeling of being invisible for so long. And even though I had finally gotten the truth, something had shifted in the way I saw them. I realized that even if they didn't fully understand my pain, they had still made their choices. I couldn't unsee that. It was clear that things weren't going to magically go back to the way they were before. The family dynamic had been permanently altered. I couldn't just pretend like everything was okay anymore. I had learned the truth, but it didn't make the pain go away. After everything that happened, I knew I had to make a decision about how to move forward. The truth had been exposed, and while it gave me some clarity, it also left me with a lot to process. For a while, I felt like I needed to distance myself from the family. I needed space to heal, to figure out who I was beyond the role they had always cast me in. I couldn't keep pretending like nothing had changed. The hurt was too deep, and I wasn't ready to just let it go. Not yet. But at the same time, I knew I didn't want to walk away completely. Despite all the pain, they were still my family. I had to decide if I was willing to rebuild our relationship, but this time, on my own terms. I couldn't go back to the way things were before. If anything was going to change, I needed boundaries. Healthy boundaries where I wasn't made to feel invisible again. I knew it would take time, maybe even years, to truly rebuild the trust and closeness we once had, but at least now I could move forward with honesty. The truth had given me some much-needed closure, even if it wasn't the happy ending I hoped for. It didn't erase the pain, but it allowed me to see things clearly, and that was important. I could stop pretending like nothing was wrong and start focusing on what was best for me. The truth may have hurt, but in the end, it gave me the closure I needed. It leaves me wondering, what would you do if you found out the truth about something that's been hurting you for years? Would you face it head on, or would you keep it buried, hoping it would go away?